Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing fantastic out there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great. Hit that like button, comment. You guys know the deal at this point. All right, so today was the day that we got a lot of dirt thrown back and forth between Jimmy Butler's camp and the Miami Heat. I feel like this is going to be the last little bit for a while. I don't know how much more anybody can take. I don't really honestly know how much this landed with Heat fans, if you felt any different any type of way. But obviously it went viral. It went crazy because the first piece from The Athletic that dropped today from Sam Amick, James Jackson, and John Krasinski. It took it had a crazy anecdote right out of the gate where it basically said that Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler spent many months back and forth. It had been more than 5 years since they joined forces, and now the relationship was on the brink. According to multiple league sources with knowledge of their meeting, tears welled up in Pat Riley's eyes as he attempted to connect with Butler on a human level. Both men had lost their fathers, and Riley's famed toughness faded in a moment as he thought about Butler mourning his father's death last season. But Riley's vulnerability did not land with Butler. The player viewed Riley's behavior as, quote, unhinged, a league source told Butler. A league source close to Butler said. Butler left the meeting more convinced than ever that he needed a new basketball home. Team sources close to Riley said that he promptly sent word that the meeting did not go well and was more motivated than ever to oblige. With that, any hope of accord between the progenitor of Heat culture and its modern torchbearer floated off into Biscayne Bay. In the weeks that have followed from emotions of that meeting were replaced by stone cold business, a matter-of-fact sit-down between Butler and Heat owner Mickey Harrison on January 16th, a missed flight by Butler, and a letter delivered to him via email and Federal Express detailed what the Heat viewed as sustained insubordination and all of the things that were going. So you had this piece that was put out by the Herald and by the Athletic, and that was obviously the most viral thing that came out of it was that Pat Riley apparently his tears welled up trying to talk to Jimmy Butler, relate to him on a person-to-person level, wondering how he's, I guess, doing about the whole, if he was still dealing with the death of his father from a year ago. A thing that even Jimmy's side said that the Heat let Jimmy handle last year, did show up to his funeral. And honestly, nobody knows how you're going to respond to losing a parent and how anybody deals with grief. It's a very personal thing, and it's a different thing. So I don't know how appropriate it was for Pat Riley to bring it up or not. I didn't really find it a big deal that Pat Riley got emotional about it, to be honest with you, because Pat Riley's 79. He's talked a lot about mortality lately. Pat Riley got very emotional speaking about Udonis Haslem a couple of years back, talking about UD supporting him when his brother died. He, gets, very deep thought. You think about the passing of like Jerry West and people that are very close to him. It's impossible not to probably think about that in terms of 80s. So I really didn't find that to be a big deal. To use the term unhinged with Pat Riley when I felt like a lot of the behavior from Jimmy's side has been pretty unhinged was I thought it was kind of I'm not, you don't know that it's leaked from Jimmy's side, but like we could assume that it's leaked from Jimmy's side, that this was all out there. This was from the Miami Herald from Barry Jackson. It said Butler's camp told the Athletic that Riley had agreed to shorten Butler's 7-game suspension during a January 7th meeting, but a Heat source insisted that Riley agreed to no such thing because the meeting with Riley did not go well. A subsequent meeting with Mickey Harrison and Nick Harrison also did not go well. Two sources said the Heat implored Butler to be more patient and play the rest of the season, but Butler's mind was made up. He wanted out. While Butler cited that he was being used offensively, he believed that Miami's reluctance to give him the max extension was the root of his anger. A Heat source says that Butler was the first player who ever refused to board a flight after not being granted permission to skip the flight. Yeah, this is another thing that's been hotly contested, which I think is funny just from, to be fair to the Heat on Jimmy's side of camp, there's been a lot of inconsistencies that have come out about this, because there was at one point where their camp was claiming Jimmy Butler never flies alone, that he only takes separate flights. He's only done it on a handful of occasions, and most of them were during the NBA Finals a couple of years back to deal with his father's passing, which would be a completely reasonable, understandable thing to know. But now it's all come out afterwards that, oh, actually, it's something that is done on the regular, and Spoelstra has such a routine that he's used to giving Jimmy Butler permission as long as Spo okays it. So it is things like this that give Butler's side, like, it hurts the credibility a little bit. And I'm not putting blame one way or the other, because quite frankly, I'm kind of sick of the blame game both ways, back and forth. I think everybody kind of is. I think we all kind of just want to put to bed and put behind us, because ultimately, dude, we all know the root of it. We know what the issue was. Did feelings get cranked up on both sides? Did the Heat get extra petty with shit? Did Jimmy go over the deep end? Did they both act a little unhinged in all this? Yes, to all that. But I do think that Butler's camp, from the stuff that they have leaked out, there's been a lot of contradictory stuff that they have come out with over this time. And they've liked to spin it like, oh, well, you've only heard one side. Jimmy said this today to ESPN. There was another piece, because there was like 3 pieces that came out on this today. And he said, from what he told ESPN, says, read whatever you want to read, believe whatever you want to believe, but you're not around me every day. There's always 2 sides to every story, and only one side's been told. When asked whether he would tell his side, he said, I doubt that it will, but if I do, I'm going to tell it to Shaq. And obviously Shaq had a pretty big blow up with Jimmy Butler, with Pat Riley, back at his time. I will say those sides have been mended. And even though I would say Shaq probably came, as an elite player, probably the most to defending Jimmy Butler, even though he didn't agree with a lot of his behavior, he kind of understood the human side of it. I don't think you're going to find I don't know if you would find, I know he's just joking, but I don't know if you would find Shaq all the way in your corner on that one. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if that you would. He said, I did what I was supposed to do. We didn't see eye to eye on some things. Butler was taken aback by the criticism at times. He insists, though, that he was not, that's not why he was soured by, I'm sorry. It says they were obviously talking about the keep your mouth shut thing. And then they said, Butler was taken aback by the criticism at the time, but he insists that's not why he soured on the franchise or Riley. Quote, I don't need Pat to make things right with me. I expect everybody to talk, and they're still going to talk, and I'm going to do what I always do and just put my head down. In his meetings with Riley and Harrison in early July, Butler explained that he had grown frustrated with the Heat's inability to acquire more help for him after the 2020 and 2023 finals run. That frustration grew to what he believed the team had de-emphasized his role in the offense that season. Totally fair criticism by Jimmy Butler that they weren't able to get that last piece. Not all. Look, after the 2020 finals, they had to run it back. Give a little bit of reprieve. It was a COVID season. They did run it back. They had some bad misses with losing some guys. You end up with Trevor Ariza. All right, that season ends in flames. Goran's a little bit over the hill. The next year, they make their biggest probably moves in his era, and it worked for him. Should they have pressed the gas on a little bit more? Yeah, you could argue it, but they, they didn't the next year. And the next year, they were kind of a play-in team. Kyle was looking a little bit more long in the tooth. But they do end up making a finals after a year where they fell short. And then it's the next year where, to me, that's always going to be the pivot point. Losing the way you did to Denver, and then the pivot point of that summer not getting that done. That's always going to be the one to me that's if you had a move that was going to be the move, you couldn't get it done. Been argued 100 times. Let's move on from that. A lot of arguments about the flights, though. That was a big thing. It says, in the Heat's view, everything changed when Butler left December 20th, the OKC game, after appearing to sprain an ankle and cited a stomach virus. While the Heat doesn't question if he was ill, I do. One official found it curious that he refused a COVID test. The Heat was bothered that he posted a photo of himself playing dominoes in the team's locker room while Miami was playing in Houston that night. He actually posted a video of himself celebrating on it. From that point, the Heat considered Butler to be disengaged and decided to grant his trade request. So, yep. There was another big thing in this, too, that decided that the Heat changed on some of the ways and things that they did with Butler. Like, there was one sighting of when he had the ankle injury on a long road trip in Denver. He wanted to go back to Miami to rehab, and they wouldn't let him. So... and that was before everything kind of went to hell in a handbasket. So, yeah, that does seem like the Heat were in a place where they were probably treating Jimmy a little bit different this year. Let's see. From Butler's vantage point, Riley was unhinged and disturbing, a league source close to him said. This is from The Athletic. More specifically, Butler told those close to him that longtime team president referenced Butler's recently deceased father several times during their meeting, offered unsolicited and unwanted parenting advice, and even shed tears before ending the meeting by telling Butler he loved him. As Riley sees it, according to team sources with knowledge of the thinking, he remained calm during the sit-down and let Butler guide the discussion. But when Riley raised the topic of Butler's late father, he became emotional. Riley's father was a longtime minor league baseball player and died at the age of 64 when Riley was 25. Sadly, he and Butler had this much, if not much else, at this point still in common. Quote, it struck a chord, one team source said. So no team source is denying that Pat Riley got emotional about this in this meeting. It just didn't land well with Butler, who already wasn't in a good place with Pat Riley. Mind you, there had been claims up to this point, although it's been disputed, that Pat and Jimmy hadn't really talked to this point, that they were pretty icy. Mind you, I asked Jimmy about it at the December 31st practice, which he was supposedly unhappy to be at. And he wouldn't answer if he had talked to Riley at that point. And from what we understand, he hadn't, to that point, talked to Pat Riley about that. So do with that what you will. But this was from Barry Jackson on this whole ordeal. The Heat pushed back on several claims published by The Athletic. For starters, the Heat denied that Miami ever offered to lessen the number of games in his original suspension. The source did not refute The Athletic's report that Riley became emotional when he raised the topics of Butler's late father. But the Heat found it disrespectful that Butler's camp characterized Pat Riley's demeanor as unhinged in that moment. Instead, the Heat viewed it as a raw human moment from Riley and nothing that Riley was using as leverage against Butler. That portrayal particularly angered the Heat. Yeah, I'd imagine it did. They were also resented the fact that Butler's characterization of Butler dragging an under-talented team to 2 finals. A Heat source said that disregards Goran Dragic, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Jay Crowder, and others in the 2020 run, and what Adebayo, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, and Gabe Vincent and others did in the 2023 run. Definitely have been noticing the Heat not so subtly throwing the word overachieved around in a lot of their press conferences, particularly Bam. Because I do think that Bam's contributions in all of this is undersold. I mean, the guy is a friggin' all-star, an all-defensive player. And, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt what Jimmy did in the 2020 finals was heroic because Bam was basically down to one arm. He missed some games. Goran was basically wiped from the series with the foot injury. No one's denying what Jimmy did against the Lakers, being able to win 2 games against those guys. probably the most impressive thing we've seen since Allen Iverson only winning one against the Lakers. So, but I could definitely see how that's landing annoying with the Heat, with their people, and all that type of stuff. The other thing that was funny about this is the Unhinged thing. I think it was. Oh, this is from ESPN. There are differing accounts of what transpired. This is from ESPN. There are differing accounts of exactly what transpired in meetings between Riley and Butler and subsequent meetings between Butler and the Harrisons, Mickey and Nick. Everyone agrees in the meetings that contain emotion, heat, and discussions that The Athletic earlier reported that Butler described Riley as unhinged during their meeting. However, Heat sources told ESPN that the same word, unhinged, is how they described Butler's behavior in a meeting with the Harrisons. This is great. This is so Schoolyard, Josh. I will say, the one thing that I think was definitely noticeable in all of this stuff, I do think that people do forget, like, the Harrisons own the team. And the Heat did want to carry out. Pat Riley's job is to carry out what Mick and Nicky want. Mickey and Nick want for the franchise. And on these accounts of like, well, they didn't want to pay Jimmy just to go away. If Jimmy wanted to go meet the Harrisons, they were claiming, hey, come fly to go meet us. Even though I think ESPN had reported that, I can't remember if it was ESPN or Miami Herald reported that, oh, well, he docked somewhere shorter so that he could get to him easily. It was one of these things where you're like, hey, man, it is their franchise, and I think they were definitely perturbed by the way all of this stuff went down, and I think it just gives you insight, all of this stuff, even though some of it's more vicious, some of it's kind of snaky, some of it is a little bit some of it is interesting and captivating to see how bad it got between both sides and just how both sides were done with each other. And I think that's the big thing here. I do think that, the more you've heard things go out and the people who said, hey, should the Heat have done something? Yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020. You didn't think that Jimmy, I think the Heat's arrogance of, it's funny, they both showed in this past 2 years a little bit of arrogance and buying into their own shit, because you think back to the year beforehand when Jimmy gets hurt and he was even talking shit when, he got hurt. But he was like, did the whole famous, it's that time, kind of buying into the Jimmy Butler mythology that he was going to be able to dial it up whenever. And why wouldn't you after what you did the year beforehand? But the Heat also, I think, believe that infrastructure, their organization, being a tight-knit crew was going to be enough to deflect this. And they undersold how bad and how ugly Jimmy was willing to make it. And in the end, Jimmy got what they want. Jimmy got what he wanted, I think. I'm sure all things equal that he probably would have just like, hey, just pay me the money that I want to stay here. But when they didn't, and he let them know that he didn't want to be there, he got to his endpoint where he wanted to be, which was being on another team, getting somebody else to show that they think he's worth it, even if it was kind of in a desperate situation where their plan A of Kevin Durant refused to go there. Hilarious how that all worked out. And Jimmy's original plan was to basically see if Durant and Booker could bully Bradley Beal into leaving. He ultimately got what he wanted. And it got very ugly very clearly. You cannot defend his unprofessionalism on the court. I'm not buying anything that talks into role. Did the Heat go overly petty with it, especially when Spo basically dropped the surprise on him that Haywood Highsmith was starting? Yeah, but in fairness, that was really like their first shot to him basketball wise out of the entire ordeal. Like they did try to just say, "Hey, will you come back and play full tilt?" And he wouldn't. You know why? Because he didn't want to go full gas tank. Didn't want to deal with injuries. You read in this article about he didn't like how the Heat were dealing with his injuries anymore, that they wouldn't let him go back and rehab with his team, that he said that he had a stomach virus when we all clearly saw him hurt his ankle yet again. He wasn't gonna go full tilt with the Heat. So I think a lot of that stuff was probably the most interesting thing just confirmed in all of this. I don't like that the term unhinged is being thrown back at both parties, but it's probably appropriate. Like, I know Riley was probably trying to hit with Jimmy on a personal level, but Jimmy, I mean, the damage is done there, you know? You weren't going to get there. And really, I think what is truly true is the people who are unhinged by all this is the fan base, dude. We are tired of this story. So I'm ready to retire it. I'm not going to hold myself to a vow on that, because if something else comes up that's juicy, I'm going to talk about it. It's what I do. But, all right, I got to feel like all the firing of bombs has been thrown back and forth. Very clearly, there is a lot of hostility held over seemingly mostly how Jimmy travels and availability to be around everybody else. It annoyed the Heat, and it annoyed Jimmy Butler that he wasn't given those special treatments anymore, especially after they said, no extension and also no special treatments. So, nothing I read today, though, even in the insight of the breakup, and we like getting a look behind the curtain, none of it really painted anything that we didn't know as far as why we got here. We know why we got here. We know why we are where we are. And hopefully this can just be the end of a while for all the petty stuff being thrown out. Not a great look by both sides. Bitter divorce. And God, I can't believe that he'd only scored 9 points today in the fourth quarter. Jesus.